And we are now back in open public session, whatever the right term is. And so I'm gonna, the next item is approval of the warrant, but we have a couple people who will be in a minute. So is there someone here tonight for public participation for something that's not on the agenda?
Yes, but I'd like to be here when the entire board
Sure,
is available.
that makes sense. Okay.
Tom isn't going to be here at all, though.
Yeah,
Well,
but,
whoever is here.
yeah, of course. That makes perfect sense. I was just trying to think of a way to move us ahead. So I also will report that our student representative, Bridget Conceição, is sick and not able to come tonight, though that's why she's not here, and we don't have a report from her. Yeah. And I was going to give a subcommittee report, so maybe I can do that now. The Burlington Youth and Family Services Department, which I am the liaison for, had a meeting recently, a board meeting, and I again want to thank them for all the great work that they do. I just wanted to update with the new school year. The Youth and Family Services, it does work with our schools, and they've been a great partner. Chrissy Conceição at the high school is our liaison, and we really appreciate everything that you do, that she does. It's been really nice. I know we have a new adjustment counselor at the high school, so we're really thrilled with that. And so the Youth and Family Services clinicians have had to find other spaces, and I know you've been really helpful making sure that that works for them. I also understand that we have a clinician from Leahy who comes to the high school to help out with our emotional needs for students. And also Christine Truhan, the director at the Youth and Family Services, is hoping to continue to expand and collaborate more with the middle school and with the elementary schools. So I wanted to report on all of that, but also thank the Christine Truhan for all, and the staff there, because we're all working together to help our students who have serious emotional needs. And you know, we have staff on staff who are really helpful, but sometimes we need more than that. So it's been really a good partnership. So I wanted to just fill people in on that. Do you have any other subcommittee reports? Okay. Do you have any other subcommittee reports, Mrs. Russo? Okay. So the next item is the approval of the warrant. And I would accept a motion.
Move we accept the warrant as presented.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. So that's 3. I'm sorry, anyone opposed? Anyone abstain?
I abstain.
Thank you. All right, so that's approved. And we have someone who's interested in speaking public participation on something that's not on the agenda. Ms. Marcus, if you want to come on up. Thank you. Thank you.
Just so you know, someone seems to have stolen the foam off of this microphone.
Yeah, they're all.
Good evening. My name is Diana Marcus, and I'm the president of the Burlington Educators Association. In that role, I am charged with safeguarding and advancing public education through advocacy for the working conditions of over 400 educators here in Burlington. That includes making sure that all 400 plus members are treated equitably. I am here tonight because over the past several years, I have witnessed an increase in the inequity with which BEA members are treated, specifically deliberate attempts on the part of the administration to favor some members over others, giving them de facto authority over others, additional compensation, and other privileges. Additionally, the administration has worked to create division within the association. pitting members against other members, and characterizing the association's work to ensure equity as campaigns against individual members. These practices are especially prevalent in the curriculum office under Assistant Superintendent Patrick Larkin, but have also been supported and amplified by the superintendent himself. While there are a myriad of events I could bring forward from the past several years, you may remember some of them from the grievance over the ELL materials. I have brought two recent especially egregious examples in the form of postings that demonstrate a lack of integrity in the leadership of the curriculum office. The first page in front of you is a posting for the ELL coordinator that you approved on August 20th of this year. I am sorry to tell you that you were intentionally misled into approving a position that violated labor laws, DESE regulations, and the stated beliefs of this district regarding conflicts of interest in coaching and evaluation. If you look at the back page under compensation, you will see that the position is listed as being part of the BEA's Unit D, a unit that makes considerably more than the Unit A positions due to the evaluation responsibilities that these positions entail. There are no director or coordinator positions in Unit D, and any additional new positions, by which I mean positions that do not align with the current job descriptions in the unit. As such, this position should have been brought to the BEA and the Unit D membership and bargained. The administration does not have the right to unilaterally add job titles to an association unit, and the superintendent is aware of this as he attempted to do this previously. Even so, the superintendent refused to remove the posting until your attorney, Darren Klein, informed him that he was wrong. I will come back to my concerns beyond the unfair labor practice indicated by this situation shortly. If you look at the list of responsibilities in this job description, you will see that it clearly contravenes the superintendent's stated policy and belief regarding separating coaching and evaluation. In fact, positions were eliminated shortly after Dr. Conti arrived in Burlington, specifically because he felt that no one should make curriculum decisions and then evaluate educators based on the success of that same curriculum. Both the assignment to Unit D and the conflict of interest caused by having coaching and evaluation in the same position are worrisome on their own. But I am here tonight with an even greater concern. This committee was asked to approve a posting that is in blatant violation of DESE regulations. Please take a look at the last bullet in the requirements section of this posting. It lists certification in educational leadership preferred with, i.e. supervisor, director, or principal in parentheses. Mr. Larkin, as head of ELL for some time now, surely knew that the criteria for an ELL director, number 14 in the list of ELE requirements, requires, not prefers, requires anyone hired into this position to have a supervisor director non-core license. A principal's license is not adequate. There are two possibilities for this posting coming forward in the form that it did, both of which are troubling. One, that the assistant superintendent was unaware of the regulations that govern this position, or two, that he was aware of these regulations and intentionally attempted to circumvent them in order to favor certain members over others and provide an inequitable access to positions. This now brings me to the second job posting I have provided. I first learned of the intent to create this posting from an email from the superintendent, which indicated that the posting would be for work beyond the contracted school day for one individual who already has a flexible schedule. I requested additional information, and the more I asked for specificity, the more the responses skirted the issues. I received a very lengthy explanation of the genesis of the Keys to Literacy initiative. I asked for the information that is typically included.
Excuse me, Ms. Marcus, I'm sorry. I wasn't aware that, I've been busy taking notes. I'm trying to pay a lot of attention to what you're saying, but typically it's taking quite a while. Is this going to, are you near the end of it?
I
or-
am near the end
Okay,
of this.
all right,
But I am
good.
also not leaving until I'm done. I'm sorry, but
I'm
this is
glad-
an important
okay,
issue.
It is an important issue. Okay, so go ahead and continue.
And
But
if you
can,
limit me to 3 minutes, I have other people who can come up and take in another 3 minutes.
that's right.
And they
Thank
can,
you.
and
Okay.
they can.
but that's the way that we run our meetings, so I just wanted to be sure you knew about it.
Yes. I
Thank
asked
you.
for information typically included in a posting, such as the scope of the work and the number of hours authorized. When the posting came out, it was in the form you see in front of you now. There is no indication of when the work will be conducted, what the work will be, how many hours would be given to complete the work. Additionally, when I looked at this posting, I looked at it through the eyes of someone who expected it to be an after-school stipend. That was a mistake on my part. When I handed it to someone with fresh eyes, they saw that, in fact, that's not the way this is written. If you look at it, it is actually, given that we have 23 KTL coaches, a position for, a posting for 24 full-time positions. To the best of my knowledge, that is not the intent of this posting, nor do I believe that that is allowed within our current budget. If it is, I will be thrilled. Read it for yourself and you'll see. I know that it is not the intention, but it does provide the KTL coordinator with a blank check. As this position is really only open to one person in the curriculum office, it's a blatant example of the favoritism being practiced in the curriculum office under the assistant superintendent. I'm going to briefly circle back to my concerns regarding the unilateral insertion of Unit A positions and newly created positions into Unit D, because this, to me, is the most concerning for me as the president of the association. I would assume that some of the others are the most important to you as the school committee. This first became an issue when the superintendent placed a Unit A member onto the Unit D salary scale without notification to the BEA. When I discovered this error, I brought it to the attention of the superintendent and insisted that he rectify the situation. While I understand that it was the intent of the superintendent to make additional hours and days worked by this member pensionable, this action violated the Unit D member's rights to determine the recognition clause and common responsibilities that define the unit. Additionally, no other BEA member with a similar title or any other BEA member in general was able to receive the same opportunity, creating an inequitable environment for all members. The superintendent assured me that this would be corrected. When we returned to school the next August, I found that the Unit A member was still on the Unit D salary scale. At this point, I informed the superintendent that I would need to file charges if the situation was not rectified immediately. But what happened next was extremely concerning, far more so than the original action, which I do believe was first done with a positive intent. The superintendent did not tell the member that he made a mistake. He told them that the union was denying them the ability to have their income in a pensionable form. I was verbally attacked in the BHS principal's office by this member who charged me with targeting my own members based on the presentation of the corrective action by the superintendent. I don't know precisely the language that was used by the superintendent, but I can tell you what that member said to me regarding their understanding of what the superintendent had told them. This was a clear attempt to turn a member and a colleague in the same role against the union. With the two postings that I provided you, there's been a repeated message that the concerns raised by the BEA are, in fact, attacks upon our members. This could not be further from the truth. The association has a duty of care to all 400-plus members. As you are aware, the BEA board communicated their concerns regarding the execution of the duties of the assistant superintendent's office to the superintendent earlier this calendar year. We as a board are concerned and are here tonight that by the actions taken by the assistant superintendent, and that they indicate that rather than working to remediate the issues we brought forward, he is now doubling down on these practices with the approval of the superintendent. I ask that the school committee investigate these situations and take whatever corrective action is needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there someone who would like to respond? Yes, Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, this sounds like a grievance to me. Is this something that you're going to file formally as a grievance?
We can. At this point, we would have to bring it directly to you. The fact is that we've already reached out to try to make changes here, and it's not happening. And we're deeply concerned, and quite frankly, going through the grievance process at this point is almost pointless. If you would like us to start the grievance process, we're more than happy to paper all of this.
I'm not giving you any advice. I'm just saying this normally, to me, sounds like a grievance, something that the school committee would rule on as we
Yep.
go up the ladder.
The
To
reason
start
that I
out,
brought it
there's
here-
a procedure involved.
The
and
reason I
this
brought
is
it
what
here,
happens.
Mr. Nelson, was that some of the items in here have less to do with the grievance than the fact that you were duped into approving a position that was not legal. And there
Well,
was,
we haven't
a
had a chance
grievance
to
is not
rule
going
on
to do that.
Mrs. Marcus, we haven't had a chance to rule on it, because normally it comes up through the grievance process, we look at it, we study it, and then we come to a conclusion. We can't come to any conclusions this evening, obviously.
I understand, but the fact that this was done with improper licensure requirements, I think would be a concern to you, even more so than we. I mean, if this position is given to one of my members who does not have adequate licensure, well, then that might cause some difficulty for that member in order to do their job. But in the long run, that comes back to you, because you have someone who is not properly licensed to do that job. That's not a grievance for us. That should be a grievance for you.
Thank you.
Well, that's my comment, Madam Chair.
Okay, yep. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Not at this
Did you
point.
want to add something, Mrs. Monaco?
Yeah, I find the whole thing a little confusing, which I think if it were actually a grievance that came directly to us, we might understand it better. I understand that there are several different issues here in a couple of different positions. But I feel like I need more clarity.
We will do our best to provide that then.
Okay. And I
And
know,
I should mention, all of these things I have attempted to address to both the superintendent and the assistant superintendent, to no avail.
yes, and I will want to find out more information, if you want to provide us with the information, so we can review it with our HR people, the director, and with our legal advice and our administration, then I'd be happy to look into it, so. Is there anyone else who has anything they'd like to add?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right, thank you for bringing this.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so I've already explained that our student representative is out sick, and we're sorry. I hope Bridget feels better soon. I have made a subcommittee report on the Youth and Family Services. Are there any other subcommittee reports tonight? All right. Does Ways and Means have any report tonight? No, thank you it's nice to see you here again. All right. And are there any announcements that don't really fit into any of the other categories that someone would like to report on? I guess I want to thank all the volleyball team for putting on such a wonderful fundraiser last Friday. And they won the game, they won their match, the varsity did, it was great, so I really enjoyed getting to that. Any other announcements? No. Okay. So now, the next item is instruction and technology, and we have a report on the BHS dual enrollment. I'm guessing that Mr. Adebayo is going to come up, and you coming up with other people, or? All right.
Joe, did you decide to switch?
Dual enrollment was gonna go. If that's,
No, it's up to you guys.
well,
Like I
one,
said,
yeah,
I'd be
let's
flexible.
go now. Yeah, let's do it.
I was just
We'll
gonna
go.
text you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
For moral support.
So if you want to, and say who you are when you speak, so that'd be good. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Joe Adebayo, I'm the guidance director at the high school.
I'm Christine Concession. I'm the school social worker at the high school.
So tonight, we were just gonna talk about dual enrollment, which we'll do next, but the first thing we were gonna talk about, and we just wanna get the PowerPoint up, was just some work that we've done at the high school last fall. Mrs. Concession, I gotta make sure I get that right, helped to orchestrate,
Whoops.
she's gonna get a nurse.
Maybe for people who don't know what dual enrollment is, you could just briefly say what it
Yeah.
is and how long we've had it at the high school.
We're going to actually circle back to.
You're going to get to that.
We're going to
Okay.
get to dual enrollment. So
Thank you.
what we wanted to talk about a little bit tonight was just about the social emotional structure at the high school. First and foremost, the past couple of years, we've been conducting the Youth Risk Survey, which, the results have been public. And we've been looking at those results, pretty consistently over the past several years. And the guidance department, the Bridge program, over the past several years, we have seen a steady increase with, mental health concerns, anxiety, depression issues that just pop up. Statistically, overall, there isn't a huge number of students, but it's enough to be noticeable over the past couple of years. So what we did is, thank you. One of the big things that we did in the guidance department last year, if you recall, we had made a request for a school adjustment counselor. And I can tell you, we appreciate that very much. It has really been a huge asset to the guidance department. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides. The other change, if you will, with the social emotional structure at the high school is one of our special ed teachers left to go to the middle school, and instead of replacing with another special education instructor, it was replaced with a school psychologist. So we've really been able to, again, thanks to your efforts too, to really improve the social emotional structure at the high school. And we've developed some great partnerships with local agencies, and I'm going to let Chrissy kind of jump in and talk a little bit about some of the things that we worked on last spring and including into this fall. Mrs. Concession.
Hi. So as you mentioned earlier, we have some really wonderful partnerships with some local agencies here. We've had a standing relationship with Burlington Youth and Family Services, who we work with their clinicians and also their MSW interns to provide in-school counseling for our students. We've also recently this will be our third year working with Leahy Behavioral Health Services, who actually, it was 2 clinicians. One's actually moved into a school setting herself. So one clinician, we're hoping to get another one back on board. And they're working with us in the high school and the middle school to provide in-school counseling for us as well. And just this year, we're actually partnering with Arbor as well. They reached out to us for both middle school and high school and have a male clinician on board, which could be very beneficial for some of our students. And I think one of the things that we're trying to really shift here in the high school this year is to do some more proactive outreach. So that's really been possible due to the increase in staff. When there was myself and one school psychologist, we were pretty much putting out fires every day, but now that there's 4 of us in the building, it's really given us the opportunity to be more proactive. So some examples of what we've tried to be doing this year is we are doing, we call it the Mental Health Monthly. It's a newsletter that's sent to all staff in Burlington High School. We're really proud of it so far. We've sent one in September and October. They each have a theme. They have some links to some mental health news updates, things that can be implemented in the classroom. We try to highlight some of the staff that are really trying to incorporate social emotional learning into their classroom already in Burlington High School. We've started to do some more informational bulletins around the school on mental health. The month of October was destigmatizing mental health within the public school setting. So if you happen to be walking around the halls of the high school, you would see some bulletins around that. Next month is how gratitude can affect your attitude, if you want to come check it out. And then we're trying to move a little bit more into the classroom. Myself and Taylor Lecanto for the past couple of years have been working with the AP Directed Study students, but it was a very limited capacity. This year we're really trying to expand that program. We're going to be working with them at least monthly to talk about the stresses of the AP course load, how that will kind of impact, study skills, coping strategies. So the 4 of us will be going in there and working with those students. Myself and the new adjustment counselor also had an opportunity to meet with all of our ELL students. We hosted a pizza lunch a couple of weeks ago, and we're looking to hopefully work with that cohort of kids some more. And we're actually doing, piloting a mini mindfulness class with Ms. Kennedy's kindergarten classroom, which is every Thursday, just kind of teaching the kids some strategies up there, which has been a nice shift. And we also get to meet with the high school kids in kind of a different realm up there. They're usually up there assigned to child development, so we get to see them in a different way too. And then kind of the big thing that we did pilot last year was a universal mental health screener. So should we go right into that? Do you want to go
jump
into that?
in. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, do you want to? What's the next one? So a couple of years ago, the director of, I'm actually not sure if he's the director of guidance or school support services, John Crocker and Methuen started a consortium of Massachusetts school districts and reached out to all school districts, really. He started with Eastern Massachusetts, and guidance counselors, social workers, school psychologists, anyone working in kind of the mental health field, and asked us to come together. And Joe and I and people from Burlington Public Schools, so not just the high school, middle school, elementary schools, were actually at the first meeting, and it was a very large meeting, and we've continued to be a part of that consortium. There, John became involved with the University of Maryland, who is the National Association for School Mental Health, and they've developed kind of this system called the SHAPE system. And he has really been working with school districts and that's their three kind of, that's the Massachusetts School Mental Health Consortium. I always struggle telling Joe where I'm going because it's too long of an acronym for me. But their goal is to increase awareness, promote mental health well-being, and increase access to and utilization of evidence-based mental health services. So throughout this, when we were meeting, and it's a once-a-month meeting, just the consortium, we talked about implementing a universal mental health screener here in Burlington Public Schools. And that's kind of what we met. So away from that, we met as a group last fall. I think yeah, that's okay. So we met as a group last fall. So there were representatives from the elementary level all the way up to the high school level to talk about, could we implement a universal mental health screener? Do we need to implement a universal mental health screener here in Burlington? What would be our objectives of that? And I think as a group, we all kind of agreed that we were seeing an increase in students presenting with some concerns, some mental health concerns, as early as elementary and definitely up into the high school. And we thought perhaps it would be nice to pilot and see what our results were. I know we look a lot at the YRBS results, but that tends to be just the middle school and the high school, and this universal screener could go all the way down into the elementary levels. So we identified the RCADS, which is short for the Revised Child Anxiety Depression Screener. We chose that for a couple different reasons. One, it's student-driven, so the students answer the questions themselves. It can start at grades 3 and goes all the way up through grades 12. It screens for anxiety and depression, which were the two areas of concern that the team members felt were the biggest here in Burlington. It can be utilized for screening and for progress monitoring. So there are other districts that are already utilizing this in Massachusetts, and we had talked with them, and we also talked with our partners. We still continue to work with McLean Hospital staff here, and they recommended this as a possible screener as well. And then we did a pilot in spring of last year. So we did 1 4th grade class in each elementary school, 1 6th grade team, and 4 9th grade English classes here at BHS. Oh, yes, right. So, so I think one of the reasons we thought the universal screener would be helpful, it's non-anonymous, so the students were made aware that their names were on this. And I do, it was nice in the sense that when students presented with an area of concern, we knew which students, and we were able to address the students in particular. And I think I go into in the next slide about, or maybe I don't. But parents were given pre-notice with a letter. They had the opportunity to opt out. Students also had the opportunity to opt out. We did have a couple of students and parents who chose to opt out, but generally everyone participated in the screener. It was a very small number that opted out. Let me see. It's a 25-question screener that the students were able to complete via Google form, so it was quick, it was easy. We were in and out of the classrooms within 10 minutes. All the schools were very receptive to allowing me. I went to the elementary schools to go down and come in for 10 minutes. I was shocked at how great the 4th graders were with logging in and being able to do the screener and understanding the questions. like I said, other districts are already implementing this as a universal screener. So we kind of took the lead, or took the lead from them and chose that as our option. So then, just a little bit about the interpretation and results. So after the students answer the questions, a T-score is calculated that basically puts them into certain ranges, one being an elevated risk, two being experiencing clinically significant concerns around anxiety and depression. So what we did is calculated all the scores for the students that participated. There were approximately 200 students district-wide. And what we did find is that it was some really wonderful results, is that no students in the elementary or the middle school levels technically screened in, so no students rose to a level above 65. However, the levels did vary drastically between the students. So we had students who scored in the areas of the 20 area. We also had students who were right below what would have been a screen-in. We also, I think, and in Burlington with the high school, we had 17 students screen in who were previously unknown to Burlington High School staff for being concerned with a mental health concern. So they weren't known to Guidance Bridge, they weren't on a 504 or an IEP for social emotional reasons. And I met with those students one-on-one and reached out to all of their parents and worked on referral services and information for them. I think the other thing that the RCADS, the screener, provided with us, was an opportunity to create a dialogue with students that we normally wouldn't create. There was a question on the screener that if the screener was questions of never, sometimes, often, or always, and there was a question that if students answered often or always, we were going to meet with that student that day. And there were students who answered often or always in all levels, including elementary. So it did provide an opportunity for the staff to be able to have some nice conversations with students and start some dialogue with students that might not otherwise have been started. So our next steps and goals would be, we are hoping to do an expanded pilot this fall, which would be the entire 4th grade, the entire 6th grade, and the entire 9th grade. And really our goal is to identify students, known and unknown, who are struggling with symptoms specifically related to anxiety or depression, attempt to move to a more proactive mental health model district-wide, utilize a consistent tool district-wide with the goal of long-term progress monitoring, and develop and implement a more concise referral methods for students presenting with mental health concerns. So once again, to increase our partnerships and possibly work with the Interface Referral Service, which is a referral service that many towns have taken into consideration, which offers town residents access to a referral for mental health services within 2 weeks.
So, Madam Chair, when Chrissy and Joe came and we talked about the initial pilot last year, I think it was really the proactive nature of the RCADS, the opportunities, that was the sort of, I think, was the most significant from my perspective. And Chrissy, I think you felt that as well. You said the WireBS data was helpful. But, you know, looking at it globally, but you saw a lot of the students having these issues and not knowing who the students were. That didn't allow for, again, we were creating positive programming, but didn't necessarily allow for the proactive nature of the services. So I think this, the RCADS, the limited pilot, I think was very successful at the high school level, and largely due to Chrissy's efforts and the efforts of the teachers who are helping. So we'd like to do this, again, in a more robust way. The pilot this year, which would be full 4, you said full 6 and full 9, it wouldn't grow beyond that. So
No.
it would just really be those 3 screeners moving forward. And then we would look at the data and then try to identify, again, students individually with communication with their parents in a proactive way. So I think we want to try, again, whole grade this year, and then we'll see if we have the same positive results as with the limited pilot, and then go back from there. But I think it's an important tool for us to have, given the levels of anxiety and depression that we're seeing, because we're having to deal with it, react to it after the fact. If we can get ahead of it, it would just help us even more. So I want to say that. Chrissy, I just wanted you to spend another minute with the interface referral service,
Sure.
because that is, it's something that, if we entered into this referral service, it wouldn't just be for the children in the school district, it would be for everyone across town. So I did communicate with Christine Truhan and Joanne Faust. Christine is very interested, and she's talked to other communities who have this tool, so she would be very interested in having this tool available to Burlington residents. And again, it's a referral service to help people find services they need for mental health. And you might say, doesn't that compete with children and family services? And I think she is one possibility for those referrals, but there may be people who want to not receive their services in town. And I think what we struggle with oftentimes is finding the proper referral or service, especially for adolescents, can be very challenging. And so I think this services has helped.
If I could just interject here as someone who's been on the board with the Youth and Family Services, they also have a wait list for a good part of the year, many years, and this year, I believe, will be one of them. So it's, maybe they would like to take all the referrals that we had, but they may not be able to, and this would be a way to expand services for families and youth in Burlington.
So again, I think it would be another partnership, so even if the school were to enter into this relationship, it would be something that would be available to everyone in town. Joe, you said you live in a community where that participates with Interface, is that correct?
Yep. So the town that I currently live in just started with Interface a couple of weeks ago. And again, the appeal for this particular agency is it's available to the entire community. So it's not just exclusive to the schools. It's for any age range within the community. And the other thing, sometimes we have difficulty finding counselors that speak particular languages. And so this agency can help with a referral service for that as well. We cold called, right, just to talk to them. And it was very, it seemed very organized. They do an intake over the phone that's 15 to 20 minutes. They ask all sorts of questions. And then they identify, based on whatever, depending on the client, they will look in the immediate area to see about setting up counseling. And then they follow up with the individual to make sure that they actually have a scheduled appointment. So I think it's pretty powerful in the sense that, it can expand to the entire town.
And again, the cost of that, I know is roughly around $15,000 a year, is that correct?
$13,000 a year with a 2-year contract.
2-year contract.
Okay, so, Mr. Nelson?
First of all, I just want to say it's a pleasure to see Mr. Adebato and Mrs. Concesian here this evening. Thank you for coming. I've been on this committee for a long time, and one of the biggest concerns I have year after year is looking and reading the results of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. And I often wonder if we're doing enough to respond to the serious, issues that are raised by that survey. And it's just thrilling for me to see what you're doing tonight. It's an absolute thrill. I am so pleased that you're doing what you're doing and responding to the issues that are raised in that survey. I know that the superintendent has certain goals that he's going to present to us, and he has presented to us tonight, and there's a lot of emphasis on the psychological development of our students. And to see what you're doing, I am thrilled. You have my 100% support for expanding the program. I think if you need more support, and Christine, you mentioned that tonight, it's nice to have more support. You might need more. Once you get the results of your expanded pilot, you might need more support, and please advocate for that, because I think every member of this committee would support you. This is an area where we can do so much more, I think, to help students who are struggling. When you read the results of this behavior survey, we realize a lot of kids are suffering from depression. They come to school and they have dark feelings. They don't feel happy when they're in school. And to get the results of this program, and then to, like you said, to be able to meet with them right away if they're having these feelings, it's tremendous. So I just want to commend you for all of the hard work you're doing, and thank you for piloting this program. Take it to the next step and the step after that, and I think you'll get the support of everybody here in the committee. So thank you very much.
Okay, Mrs. Monica?
everything he said. And then, on top of that, I'd just like to say, let us know how it goes. You know, so we're kept up to date on whether or not you feel like it's working the way you want it to.
Of course.
Thank you.
Yes. Mrs. Russo?
Thank you. I just had a question. Last week, or our last meeting, we learned about the DESA, DESSA. How does this relate to that, or does it?
Maybe I'll let.
No, go ahead.
Well, I
And
just
then-
know that DESA is, I'm sure you can fill in the blanks for me, but this is filled out by the student, and it's specifically, for anxiety, depression. And it's the student filling out the form, whereas I believe.
Again, DESA is a social emotional screener, and it's a what is it? It's a positive. It looks for
yes.
positive
Right,
attributes,
right.
and the teachers fill it out. So it's basically how effective our Tier 1 curriculum is in social emotional. It's not a measure of anxiety or depression. Again, it's a
Okay.
measure. It's a strength-based, basically screener for social emotional skills. I'm sure there's a correlation. If we say sort of a huge drop-off in red flags in terms of social emotional, we may see high levels of anxiety and depression. But I think this tool is, again, students are filling it out, not teachers, and it's really meant to flag mental health issues that then can be followed up on individually. And I think that was certainly the missing piece with the YRBS. And again, I'm hoping if we do well with social emotional learning and continue to do well with that, and I think we do a very good job with that, then we'll see more kids having the skills to help them deal with the anxiety and depression that they're seeing. But this is this is another tool.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
I also wanted to mention that I like that it is not anonymous, and that's I haven't been looking at the youth risk behavior surveys as long as some of the other members of the committee, but it is hard to figure out what do we do and who do we need to reach out to with those. I mean, we get some good information from that, but being able to identify which students need what and being able to just go and talk to them is a wonderful resource. So I'm really glad and appreciate. It sounds like it takes a lot of time and effort, so we appreciate that. I also think, is there someone in the audience who would like to comment on this? Why don't you come up so that people you can speak into, if somebody could let her speak into the microphone, and if you could please tell us who you are.
I'm Catherine Bond, and my question was really, why is the cutoff in ninth grade?
Okay.
Why not juniors where we're so stressed out? You know what I'm saying? 'Cause I feel like if you are able to include juniors in that, they're going to be better prepared to handle the stresses going off to college. And I'm only bringing it up because my daughter is in college, and a sophomore. A freshman committed suicide last week. And so it's just kind of making sure that they're better prepared. You know, are we looking into that and helping these kids? Because again, I think, freshmen have a different set of stresses than juniors and seniors do. And we want to make sure they're prepared as best they can when they're going off to college. Thank you.
So, we talked as a committee on which grades we wanted to pilot with, and I think what kind of boiled down for us was that the elementary school wanted fourth grade in an effort to have a year to do some proactive work with them. The middle school wanted the sixth grade in an attempt to identify and do some work with them within the middle school. And we thought to ourselves, well, let's have the ninth grade, because that then gives us 4 years to identify, put in services, put in some proactive work with them with the hopes of addressing some of the concerns, obviously, before students transition off to the college setting or the post-high school life. I know other districts, do choose to screen every single grade. We thought if we could catch students at a time frame where we then, as the schools, could implement services and provide support, that's kind of what our thought process was around choosing those grades.
And then just to piggyback, the youth risk survey data that we saw, freshmen had the highest percentage of, students having, a variety of behaviors and issues. So that kind of came out through the youth risk survey, which was another reason we kind of focused in on freshmen. But we can certainly, we now meet as a committee, so that's something we can certainly talk about.
Like I said, I was just thinking about it in terms of, getting them better prepared for
Yeah.
college. And I also know that, a lot of times when the kids pay attention to what's going on, and then they, you talk about inequities, and they're like, well, gee, how come they, always implement the stuff after I. That kind of thing, so.
Okay. All right, so are there any other comments or questions on these issues that you've already raised? And it looks like you have another issue for us, another topic for us, so. shall we
We're going to
move
call
on?
these celebrations, not issues, so.
Topics.
We're going to stay, we're
Topics.
staying positive.
Yes, so thank you for all, that's a lot of work that you're doing, so thank you for that.
Yeah, I just want to let you know too, because of the work Chrissy did last year, she's going to be presenting at this consortium of schools. When is that coming up? Is that coming up soon?
Coming up soon.
Yeah, so she's going to present to probably, at least 50 or 60 now other districts on
Good.
this piloting process.
Great.
So just want to make sure I recognize
Great.
her for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chrissy, thank you.
Thanks. All right, so I'm just going to jump right into dual enrollment. Again, I think, as Dr. Conti said, this could certainly be considered a celebration. I just wanted to talk about what dual enrollment is, where we are, and where we're going. So this model was originally introduced by Dr. Conti back in 2010. The school system he previously came from had students graduating high school with up to 30 to 35 college credits. And students could actually graduate high school with an associate degree. And so we kind of worked together. We worked with Middlesex to get the program started. Dual enrollment, just as frame of reference, and I'll cover it again later, but when we talk about dual enrollment, I think typically people think dual enrollment is when a student will take a course at night at a local college. So they'll get college credit, and then certainly the high school would recognize that credit. This is a little different. Our current staff members that are teaching the course, certain courses during the school day are also considered adjunct professors at Middlesex. Middlesex and our teachers are working together to develop the curriculum. Middlesex obviously wants to ensure that the teachers here are following the curriculum at Middlesex. So we implemented this back in 2010. It was baby steps at first, but again, it's starting to take off. And the goal was really to have students graduate anywhere from 3 to upwards of 30 credits. Again, these are actual college credits. So the program, again, continues to grow and gain in popularity. In fact, they just appointed a new director at Middlesex that is responsible for this program. And she'll actually be attending an upcoming department head meeting at the high school to talk with all the department heads about maybe considering adding a few courses. So students qualify in a variety of ways, and most of the time they need to meet certain prerequisites. We've really tried to streamline it as much as possible. One of the big prerequisites that we have is the PSATs. So if a student scores a minimum of 480 on the ELA section of the PSAT, that would allow them to then enroll in a dual enrollment course. I think in the eyes of Middlesex, they want to make sure students are college-ready in terms of English, and since we offer the PSAT, they were fine with us using that. Previous to that, we had to give students interested a separate test. It was very cumbersome, so we really tried to streamline it as much as possible. A common question is, what's the difference between dual enrollment and advanced placement? Okay, so dual enrollment, you are signing up for an actual course, and when the course is completed, you'll get an actual transcript from Middlesex Community College. That credit can then be applied to virtually any public college or university, and then several privates. So again, that gives students actual credit. AP, if you score high enough on the test in May, again, it's not a guarantee once you're enrolled in AP that you're going to score high enough, but if you do, colleges will then waive students from certain credit requirements. So that does allow the student to advance, but not necessarily giving them actual college credit. So advantages to college credit, I think you can probably figure it out, the financial aspect. But first year in college, if a student had 6 credits already, they can take, full-time in college is either 4 or 5 classes. Student could take 1 less class to help with the adjustment. The other thing is the Koplik scholarship. It's an MCAS. It's actually a tuition waiver. So they will allow students to submit a dual enrollment course as part of that application process. So that certainly helps with that. Students are not required to take this. They do have to pay for it. It's $92 per credit. It's a dual enrollment rate. And if the student qualifies, they fill out an application. It's sent off to Middlesex. Middlesex sends them a bill. Teachers, again, are trained. Teachers have to submit grades via Middlesex, just like our teachers submit here in Aspen. Middlesex provides them with the dual enrollment teachers with the login information to access their program to put in student grades. Right now, what we're looking at doing is identifying a dual enrollment class on the transcript, because the state schools, the Massachusetts Public Colleges and Universities, have told us they will weigh the dual enrollment classes the same as AP. So they give it the same weight. So, as you probably all know or have heard over the years, colleges will recalculate the student's GPA. So the Burlington GPA isn't used as part of the admission process. They will recalculate the GPA, and they usually give extra points to AP. Again, the Mass Public College and University are giving the same point value to dual enrollment. And that's because the teachers are teaching a college course. Dual enrollment courses, again, the way we're structured, students are not leaving the building to go to a campus. They're here in-house. The other positive here is a student, if they have, say, 10 credits built up, they could maybe pursue a minor that they wouldn't otherwise have had the opportunity to do. So they could actually use those credits to pursue a minor. So there's a lot of advantages to it. So what courses do we have here at the high school now that are considered dual enrollment? Honors and AP psychology. So that's like, a 2-for-1 deal there when you're taking an AP class, because you could theoretically get the AP along and then also participate in dual enrollment. Human anatomy and physiology. So the name in the parentheses is the recognized course at Middlesex. So for example, honors and AP psych are both considered Psych 101. Human anatomy and physiology is considered basic anatomy. Honors calculus. Our honors calculus is a full-year calculus class. It's considered Calculus 1 for engineering and science. Programming, intro to programming, honors, and right now it looks like college prep. AP Lit, and then Latin. Latin is a little bit different of an agreement. That is actually with UMass Boston, and that's strictly because the teacher is very well connected at UMass Boston with a professor there, and so they kind of still get dual enrollment, but it's through UMass Boston. So we're hoping next year to get honors senior English, in the 2 AP computer science classes. I think the honors senior English will really bolster the numbers quite a bit. And overall, I didn't put the statistics, but I think right now we're, in terms of what is available for students in terms of dual enrollment, there's these courses, but the student numbers wise, we're approaching, between 150 and 200 students now that could potentially get, at least 3 college credits. So again, I think it's a program that we're really trying to communicate more. We're trying to get word out as much as we can. I think it's a really good option for students if they choose to participate in it. It's helping teachers with curriculum, because again, they're working with a nearby community college to make sure the curriculum's, up to speed. So overall, I think it's really starting to gain in popularity. Word is out about it a little bit more, and we want to continue to expand on the program.
So do people have comments or questions?
No, it's a great
Mrs. Monaco?
Great job, keep it up.
Mrs. Russo?
So it's an excellent program. I'm pleased to see how it's grown. When, for example, if a student's in honors psychology, will the teacher tell them at the beginning that they can apply for dual enrollment, or should they be aware based on the handbook or schedule?
Good question. So, we have added it to the program of studies, so we've listed in our program of studies dual enrollment. We dedicated a page to it with all the courses. And then we try to promote it at our course selection meetings. And then the beginning of the year, Mr. Sullivan actually sends a letter to all the dual enrollment eligible students
Oh, okay.
with an application. And then this year, he sent the letter out. The teacher still communicates it to the students. And we actually had a table in the main lobby at our first open house for any dual enrollment questions that parents or students had.
Nice, excellent, thank you.
So, yep.
Dr. Conti?
No, I just, Mr. Eiler, why would you not do this at $92 a credit?
It obviously is a very cost-effective strategy. I think the one thing you pointed out is the one reason that we didn't do it, for instance, is that a lot of private colleges don't necessarily accept these credits. So in deciding what our children, we did look at the colleges and determined that they unfortunately wouldn't accept the credit, whereas the AP courses did allow them to advance as a result of that. But it's a great program if your college that you're planning to go to will accept it, certainly.
And I think now that we have English 101 and Psych 101, that's been a lot of the privates are accepting that as well. I don't know if we had that when your kids graduated, but,
Because what's interesting is the students who, again, this is a decade ago, who had an associate's degree prior to their high school graduation, again, it's from an accredited community college. So they would basically transfer into a four-year school with their associate's degree already. And of course, their bachelor's degree would say whatever the four-year institution was that they attended. And so it can be a very cost-effective way of obtaining a four-year college degree, and especially if you're going to stay in Massachusetts, Joe, and a large percentage of our students remain in Massachusetts or even New England schools. So again, I think the argument to me is if you're in a class, you're doing the work anyway, you don't need to leave your high school for $92 a credit. I think I would be hard pressed to not take advantage of the dual enrollment. Again, unlike AP, you might get placed. You might place out of an early class using advanced placement, but the four-year institution still wants 4 years of tuition. So I think the dual enrollment can help accelerate that and be beneficial to parents. So
Can't beat that price.
I think sometimes we get caught up in the language a little bit. Again, the difference between early college and dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment. And I think we just wanted to bring it back up to the committee to make sure that we're stressing the dual enrollment options are increasing, which I think is a huge benefit. It does, again, keep kids on campus, which I think is very important given the social aspect of high school. And I think that given the cost, or the increasing costs of four-year colleges, that I think it's going to be an option that's going to be we're going to have to expand it to meet demand. So again, Joe, thank you. I know that there's a lot of paperwork and detail, and there's a lot of territoriality that has to go. The community college has to accept our faculty as joint faculty members. I think faculty members give up a little bit of control of their curriculum, but they need to do that for advanced placement now anyway, because the College Board has to improve the advanced placement curriculum anyway. So I think it's I just think it's a direction that we need to continue to expand, and I want to recognize Joe and the whole guidance department, Mr. Sullivan, and the teachers who have actually signed up to do this. I think that's extra, they've gone above and beyond. So please pass on my gratitude, and I hope that you'll continue to see expanded opportunities for dual enrollment. And if anyone watching has questions about dual enrollment, Joe, what should they do?
they can email me or give me a call.
All right. Thank you. All right. I was just going to add what Dr. Conti just mentioned, which is that the teachers have to do additional work in order to have the curriculum that's appropriate for college and get approved and all of that. So I want to thank them as well. But I'm really glad we have this resource for our students and for you to share the information so that they know about it. Good. Thank you. Any other questions?
No.
All right.
Good job.
Joe, just before we lose you, could you just, I'll jump ahead so you can go home. Under communication, you have a great college advice presentation tomorrow night you're hosting.
Yes, yep. So we posted about it on the blog today. We have Mark Montgomery coming in. He's a college counselor, but he also is speaking more about being proactive in the college process and talking about building up a student resume, some of the things students should do throughout high school that could benefit them in terms of the college process. And that will be held tomorrow night here at the high school. If anyone wants more details, they can certainly check out the guidance blog. That will be held in the auditorium at 6 o'clock.
All right. Okay, so, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out tonight.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Joe.
I think then we'll move on under communication to our report on the spring 2019 MCAS results. Mr. Larkin, you can have a report on that. Thank you. Oh, here. Bob, I just sent it to you. Oh. It said did I want to share, and I didn't.
I had it written down, but I tried again.
Okay. All right. So, so we're now going to get a report here. All right. Okay.
Good evening. I've kind of pared this down from the 75 slides that DESE puts on some of its things and give some highlights, but certainly there's so much great stuff in the Edwin Analytics tool that the Department of Ed makes available to us in districts. So if there's information I don't have at the top of my head, I can definitely get it for you pretty quickly. So anyway, I just wanted to remind you all, since this is year 2 under the new accountability system in Massachusetts, and there's 2 different categories kind of schools. One are non-high schools, and these are the indicators that non-high schools are evaluated on. These are the things that go into their final score: achievement, student growth, English language proficiency, and then the additional indicator, which is really important, probably something we're going to be spending some more time on, is the chronic absenteeism. And the state did a nice presentation on chronic absenteeism last year, and 13% of our students in Massachusetts are typically chronically absent, which just means they miss 10% of their days or more. And then when you start looking at our economically disadvantaged students, or our students with disabilities, or English learners, those numbers tend to jump to 20%. And no surprise that there's also pretty good data on when you get to be absent for 20% of the days, what happens to your MCAS scores or any type of assessment scores because you're missing the instruction. So anyway, just food for thought as we move forward. The other area, of course, there's non-high schools and then there's high schools. And high school has a couple more indicators that are looked at. High school completion, of course, is one of those that you wouldn't have for non-high schools. And then down at the bottom, under additional indicators, the percentage of 11th and 12th graders completing at least one advanced course. And there's multiple advanced courses, and the state's been great about being kind of flexible in their thinking about advanced coursework, and one of the things they added this year was Project Lead the Way. You'll also see dual enrollment for credit, which is something we just talked about. So again, we're not doing it to make our accountability score better. Obviously, kids that take dual enrollment courses for college credit are going to have more success when they get to college. That's ultimately why we do it, but it also does help us here as well. Here's how you can see the weighting of these indicators for non-high schools, just when they start to calculate the scores out. You'll notice that if there are a few schools out there that don't have any English learners, so on the column on the right, they just kind of increased those percentages a little bit more, the top two, just to make up for the fact that there were no English learners in the school that says no EL. And then here is the weighting of indicators in high schools. Again, you'll see a similar effect here if there's high schools out there that have no ELs, that they end up adding a little bit more underachievement and student growth for those schools. And ultimately, here's where you get your criterion referenced calculation for your school or district score. And so I just wanted to show you that. And the weighting changed from 40% to 60% for 2019. So this year's, year two, they weighted a little bit heavier. And so I wanted to show you, again, this is our district score for the current year. We scored 67%, which is substantial progress towards all of our targets, which, we're happy about. Certainly would love to see get to 75, which would be meeting and exceeding, but here's where we fall when it comes to districts. You'll see this scale here. We would be in this area right here, substantial progress towards our targets as a district, because we were in between 50 and 74%. We were 67, so we were very close to moving all the way to the left, which would be meeting and exceeding our targets. All right, and it's the same categorization for schools, the same kind of a scale here. I will just quickly let you know that as a district, we had BHS, MSMS, and Memorial all fell in substantial progress towards their targets. Fox Hill and Pine Glen fell in meeting or exceeding, and Francis Wyman was in the moderate progress. Again, they were on the higher end. They were, I think, 47. They were just shy of substantial as well. So again, we're happy where we are as a district. And again, it's only year two of this, so we're still looking at a lot of the data. But we are moving in the right direction in a lot of these areas. Especially, I know we talked a couple of years ago about writing when we started to see those scores, and we're seeing some steady progress there. So I just wanted to share some highlights. Again, there's so much information here that we can look at. One of the things we like to look at is this, our district to state differential. Like, how did we do compared to the state? And you'll see, as I look through these grade by grade reports, it was very typical for us to see all numbers here that were black, no red. It was red if we were under the state average. So again, happy about that. Would we like to get those a little higher above the state? Of course, that's what we're working towards. But again, this was very typical and a positive trend. Our grade 8 this year was +4, and last year it was a -4 on this. So again, just signs of growth. Oh, that one disappeared. It's interesting. But I'll tell you that the grade 8 math would have been a +7 here, and it was a +4 last year. So we saw improvement in grade 8 math too. So I don't know what happened to that. No, that's 6. I jumped, sorry. So again, I'm just showing some highlights. I'm not going to go through 10, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3 for every one, but I just wanted to show some highlights. Grade 6 ELA was a +7. That was compared to a +3 last year. Again, overall, you'll see we can go break it down into different domains. Conventions of Standard English, they were 13 points above the state average. And it tells you the possible points because, like here, there was probably only one question on integration of knowledge and ideas. That's why the possible points column is important to look at as well. Grade 4 ELA, again, we were three points above the state average there. A couple, again, I'm not going to just show you everything that's perfect. We were a -1 on the essay, but the writing was a 0 again, which was an improvement from last year. And as you recall, we are still getting some comfort level with the kids getting on the devices, and they're getting better. And we're seeing the KTL strategies that we've been harping on in the classrooms as far as getting prepared to write, and the 2-column notes they're taking are making a difference here. So again, those are moving up from where they were previously. Jump into some math scores. Our grade 5 math scores up here, 8 points above the state average. Again, as you look down the column, you'll see everything is in the positive range.
Bef-
Yeah.
Before you go to the next one, Mrs.
Sure.
Monaco had a question.
Sure.
We don't have all of this, do we?
Not yet. I can
No.
share the slideshow
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I wanted to ask, is, because it's hard to read it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure, no
If
problem.
you'd share it with us electronically so we can look at it.
I will do that as soon as I'm done going through
Sure.
this. Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry, yeah, those numbers are small up there. Grade 6, it's big for me right here. I should have got you some opera glasses. Grade 6 math, and I'm sorry, I'm fitting it on the entire slide too, so I can't do that. I was going to try to make it bigger here. Grade 6 math, we were 9 points above the state average overall, and I won't, again, we were 19 points above the state average in the area of statistics and probability, which was great. Here's some high school scores. Again, these are just above the state average. Grade, we were 1 point above for math overall, and
Patrick,
yeah.
one other thing, this was the first year for the high school, is that correct?
This is the first year for the high school doing the next generation test. Somehow they, again, I'm not saying they didn't do it well, but they took the legacy tests and factored it in with the next generation, so I think we'll have a better idea of where we stand as we move forward. But I do want to tell you that one thing we do have is we also have some reports that can tell us how we did towards the curriculum standards and where we were in reference to the state average. So those are really helpful, as well as I shared those with the principals already, so they can look at them and share them with department heads, or curriculum coaches can meet with principals just to talk about where we saw some gaps. There weren't too many. Again, we met where we were with our moving towards our targets. There weren't too many red numbers, but I think typically we like to be probably 5 or better above the state average is kind of something we're looking for. Science, this was overall, again, remember we're just implementing our new science standards in elementary, and they've done a lot of curriculum work. Mrs. Pavlicek and Mr. Musselman, so I think this is all, they were happy with what they saw here, and looking at what units may not have been taught or what things they want to fix moving forward, but we're 3 point above the state average with the grade 5 science. And that was, again, that was all I had. I didn't want to go through too many, but I wanted to share some quick highlights with you from different grade levels, so that's what I had to start and open it up to questions. I will share that with you. I can also share my folders of data that I have on Google Drive. If you're interested, let me know.
TMI.
Okay. Anything, but any grade level or any curricular area you're interested in, I certainly can dig deeper for you. Just let me know.
All right, anyone have comments, questions? Yes, Mrs. Russo.
It's always changing, so it's, and our student population's always changing. Each grade is a different grade
Right.
with unique skills. So it is interesting to look at them through the years, starting at third grade through 10th grade. To me, the most important thing is knowing that the teachers and the departments are looking at the data, seeing what might be missed, what might not be, what they're doing well, and then expanding upon that. You know, the real works with the RTI and getting those students really targeted and the help they need for it, but it is a nice, just overall look. I thought once it went to computer, we might get the data a little sooner, but it still gives the departments and our administration and teachers the ability to look and see where we're doing well, and overall, I'm very pleased with these scores. The MCAS, like I said, has evolved and changed. If you look at the questions in the ELA that from third grade to fourth grade, there's quite an intellectual jump in the questions that are being asked, and you notice that at different points throughout the MCAS testing, and I think that's important to know as our children go through that. Overall, you know, we're doing well, and that effort by the teachers, the parents, and the students in particular is showing well. So thank you.
other comments?
No, I think so.
Well, this is good data for us to have, and we'll continue to move forward. It is a little frustrating because they've changed it, but now we have 2 years for all but the high school of data on the same type of test, and hopefully we'll be able to use it as we go forward more. So, Dr.
Yes,
Conti?
and again, I promise I'll keep to 2 minutes, but again, always want our kids to do well on standardized tests. I think it's really
Yeah.
important. Always want kids to do well on standardized tests, and we can always do better. But in terms of the correlation to sort of future success, we're seeing sort of a diminishing relevance of this type of testing. We always want our kids to do well. We certainly don't want it to be any sort of limiting factor in how they move forward, and our kids should do well. But I think the type of teaching that we are trying to promote sometimes doesn't necessarily always align with higher test-taking scores. So, having students apply knowledge to, instead of test questions, novel problems, collaborative, working in collaboration, creativity, all those things we're trying to incorporate as well, and I think our teachers do a phenomenal job. So I do think the MCAS provides some useful information. I think I don't want to celebrate if we ever do too well. I also will sort of be too heartbroken if we do poorly. I think we need to use it to adjust our curriculum, but we're going over data now in the middle of October that students took last spring. It's certainly not a timely tool or a tool that we can use to adjust day-to-day instruction. I think we can use it to look at our curricula. But I think the science, looking at the science data is always very interesting because we can't predict what content questions our students are going to be asked, and it may be that we just didn't get to that content prior to the students taking the test. So there would be no indication, no correlation at all to how well the students were taught science or how well they were prepared. It might have just been a timing issue. So again, we don't want to jump to any conclusions. I think Patrick has spent a good amount of time working with the curriculum coaches, and I think that, again, sorry, Chris, I'll go over 2 minutes, but
Steve's the one with the
Steve's
watch.
one, sorry, Steve, Mr. Nelson, but again, I just want to thank them for doing all the work they do. Ultimately, all these numbers come down to teachers' efforts in the classrooms, and our teachers do a phenomenal job, and so we're mostly pleased about that. But I have very mixed feelings about MCAS themselves, and when they change what it means to get a high school diploma, we're going to have to revisit some of our decision-making as well, because they still have yet to
Yep.
make those decisions as a state board, and I'm hoping they don't have a negative effect on kids.
All right, so can we get an MSBA update from you, Dr. Conti?
Bob,
Or-
you wanna-
or
you
from
wa-
Mr.
You want to
Cuna?
go over the
Okay.
call, or I'm sure I'll interrupt you, so might as well start.
So Dr. Conti and I did have a call with MSBA representatives last week on Friday, and not good news, meaning that they will accept, obviously, our submission, but we can only have one priority. So whether it was an accelerated repair or a core, it doesn't matter. That's still one priority that we have to set as our level one. So what that means is that we would have to pick either the high school or an elementary school and decide which elementary school we would be interested in. And we can submit as many as we want. We just have to list them in the priority. So I think we kind of already knew that and anticipated. It was just confirmed in the in the conversation that we had.
And Madam Chair, your specific question was, what if we wanted to replace 2 elementary schools on one site? And again, the interesting answer to that was we would still only submit 1 school. So in our particular
Okay.
case, if we didn't get the high school and we wanted to prioritize Fox Hill, we would have to write in only the Fox Hill school as our priority. If we were selected, then through the design phase, if we wanted to say as part of that design, we wanted to incorporate another elementary school, then we would work with MSBA on the viability of that design. So I think in our initial proposal, we'd have to choose 1 school. We would certainly say we're considering combining 2 schools into the 1, but our priority is Fox Hill. Then if we were selected, that's only the first part of the process, as you all know who've been through it. Then we'd have to go through a design phase where we'd work with the MSBA. They would have to approve sort of the merging of the two sites, and sort of the benefits, I guess, of moving in that direction. And if they were to agree to that, then they could incorporate sort of that project under that umbrella. But we wouldn't apply for replacing the Pine Glen and the Fox School at one time.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions on that? Thank you for following up on that. Yeah. Thank you for checking on that.
Just one quick follow-up. Bob, what's the deadline for the submission? Is it February or
It's the second week of April.
second week? Okay.
Correct.
We got plenty of time.
All right.
Right around the corner.
Although we need to make a decision in time for the staff to come up to write up the proposal, so.
That's assuming we don't get the high school for this year, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but even, let's say we
Yeah.
do get the high school for this year, we could then, we could submit an elementary school for April. Again, we can always have one priority in the pipeline, we just can't have more than one.
Yeah.
The likelihood of them approving two projects 2 years in a row,
Yeah,
it's
zero.
slim, but
Mhm.
but we could do that.
Slim to none, right?
Probably get the high school.
All right. Anything
Exactly.
else on the MSBA? No. All right, there's a report on the motor vehicle idling on school grounds. Dr. Conti, were you gonna, or Mr. Cuna?
I was
Were
gonna
we
say,
gonna
I was gonna say, don't do it, I'm not sure if Sharon, do you
Okay.
remember why we put that on there?
I think I remember.
Oh,
Oh, that's right.
thank you.
Don't do it.
Parents,
There
don't
there is,
idle on school
there's
grounds.
policy and there's also state regulations that prohibit idling while you're waiting to either pick up or drop off your child. So we do have no idling signs around. So tonight, under communication was the friendly reminder to please don't idle while you're waiting for your child. And I think it's creates better air quality for all of us, and it is also part of our policy. So thank you.
All right. So it's not listed here, but I also was hoping we could get a bus update, a transportation update, Mr. Cuna, and that might be a good place to do it. How are things going?
Yep. At the last school committee meetings, one of my concerns was that we had a high school bus that was, I would say, late in previous weeks, but showing up very close to the homeroom bell. Last week, adjustments were made on Monday, and every day last week, it came in before 8:30, so giving at least 5 minutes before the homeroom bell. Today, they did that as well. So we think we've at least made up the 3 minutes that we were looking for. I have spoke to Principal Sullivan today. We're comfortable where we're at right now. Our concern is that one day where we have either an accident or we get inclement weather. I reassured him that that day is gonna happen anyways and may cause some delays in the
Yeah.
buses. So we'll have to take those one day at a time. But if we can have the majority or all of our days this year where the students can get here on time and early, I'm happy with that. So again, those adjustments were made. We made up the 3 minutes. The students are getting here on time. So that's my update for buses.
All right. Any questions? And so at the elementary schools, there's no longer, buses are getting the kids here on time now, and those things have been smoothed out.
Yeah, that is true that we're smoothed out. One thing that we are watching, and it's kind of a newer concern, is at the BECC. As of Friday, we're looking at the potential of some new enrollments that may or may not need transportation, and depending on if they do and the buses that they would ride, if that's going to cause a concern on either the time that the students are on the bus or the capacity level of the bus. So again, we don't have a definitive answer, but it is something that we're just watching.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. You're looking ahead. Thank you. All right. The next item is monthly financials. Ms. Kasha, if you would please walk us through, those of us who aren't as good at it as you are.
same report that you guys have been receiving for month after month now. The first page is the revolving summary, followed by the operating and accommodated. I don't know if there's any questions or.
I have a question.
Okay, Mr. Nelson?
Nicole, on the revolving fund summary, do you have any concerns with the negative balance on the school lunch account?
No, so on the school lunch, it's noted here that the receipts for the reimbursements aren't received until the following month. And on average, I mean, they vary month to month, but the reimbursement is ballpark around 30,000.
Okay, so
So-
generally that'll make up the difference?
Correct.
Okay. With respect to the school choice program, have we earmarked any of those funds for any other needs in our budget? There's $176,000 roughly as an ending balance in school choice. Is there any, are those funds earmarked for anything?
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think we do have some Chapter 74s that we typically had paid out of there in the past. I'm working on getting the rates for this year for those students. So in the next financial report, you'd see those amounts in there.
It's one of the things we're working on with Town Hall. So if we have the state regulations allowing students to participate in vocational programming outside of their typical catchment area, which is Shawshene Voc. So we have students now attending Essex Tech, which came off the cherry sheet and is now a separate Voc. We have some students attending Minuteman Tech. We've been covering those tuitions out of school choice. I think we're working with town to, when we do that at town meeting, not talk specifically about Shawshene or Essex Tech, just talk about sort of vocational placements. Because even if we were to deny the family access to Minuteman, if they appeal to the state's been overruling those appeals pretty regularly now, because they want more kids to have that opportunity. And again, I support kids having that opportunity, so I just think we need to think about the vocational program a little bit differently. But as Ms. Kasha said, as a bridge, we're looking at school choice as being part of that. We also, again, we talked about the interface program here, for instance, tonight, which was connecting people to mental health services, which is roughly around $13,000. Before we had the opportunity to build it into our operating budget. I'm not saying we're going to pay for it out of school choice, but that would be one of the things, one of the lines I would look to utilize for enhancing a program like that. So it looks like a healthy balance, but it's really not as healthy as that.
Sure. Eric, do you think there'll be enough funds in that account to handle the vocational placements that we have?
Yes.
And same question with respect to the last item, the international studies. We have a balance right now of about $85,000. Are those funds earmarked for anything at this point?
We usually give the high school a chunk of money because we used to have a principal's sort of capital account that we no longer have. And because the high school is hosting these students, we typically give a chunk of that, not all of it, but a chunk of it to the high school principal. So haven't decided on that amount, but
Is
there'll be.
that the capital stuff?
Yes, just so the principal can solve some problems
Okay.
at the high school.
That's
We used
all I
to-
have, Madam Chair.
We used to have those capital funds for actually every principal, what we just,
Yeah, I know.
haven't had the opportunity to keep them.
Okay, Mrs. Monaco?
I just want to clarify that. When you say capital, you just mean like floor tiles and ceiling tiles and paint the bathroom and that kind of stuff,
Yes,
right?
very small things that kind of are fixed at the building level.
Right.
It could be it could be a window shade, it could be something like that.
Yeah,
It just
just
requires,
Small stuff, but it's to fix it up. Okay.
All right, any other questions about the reports? Mr. Eiler, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I just had a question about line item 59, the utilities. I was just curious why the full amount
So on the utilities line 59, you see it as spent and encumbered. Basically, we sort of, when we're budgeting, we use like projections for costs throughout the year, and then sort of look at like a 3-year weighted average, based on if it was a colder winter or whatever. And then sort of assign to each of those meters, basically, how much we anticipate spending in those, so.
Okay, so it sounds like it's more of a projection as opposed to a number that we know per se. Is that fair to say, or?
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. I just
Yeah,
wanted to make
we
sure I
don't have
understood.
fixed utility costs.
That's what
so-
I was wondering.
So,
I thought it was a variable
yeah.
cost, so it's just curious.
but it tends to be very close and very predictable, so.
Okay,
This is best guess.
great, thank you.
Okay, and it looks like our accommodated budget is still in the red, in the black, sorry.
That's right.
Still, we have money in the accommodated budget, so
That's right.
that's good.
Green.
Any other questions or comments about the financial reports? All right.
Good.
So moving on now to the next topic is the Planning for Success document. And it's been, it's on the agenda tonight as a second reading. And I'd like to first mention, and I was on a different note here, so let me see if I can find it. It's a second reading tonight, and I have some questions, and I've had some conversations with Dr. Conti about, these are the kind of documents that are in some ways kind of vague, but we have to do them, but we want them to be as useful as possible. And I am in conversation with Dr. Conti about maybe making some of it a little more substantive. In particular, when it says the 2 goals at the beginning of it are to coordinate with the pilot, and we've already kind of done that. So I would like to request that we postpone our second reading to our next meeting, and then we can look at those. So if people have other comments, we can talk about it tonight, or I can be more specific as soon as I find
think you
my
need to be
email.
more
Yeah.
specific.
All right, let me just find that email. I had to be on another document for the financials. Which day was that?
No, the bigger document.
Okay.
Where was it? I'm sorry.
This thing.
Okay, let me see if I can reconstruct it. For example, the executive summary talks about it as the planning for success as a pilot, and the first planning for success document that we looked at was a pilot, and now it's something that I believe all the school districts are doing. Is that correct, Dr. Conti?
Yes.
Yeah, so, and it says that the purpose of the work is twofold, and one is to assist our transition from the old school improvement plans or district improvement plans to the planning for success, and I don't see that as a purpose. We've already made that transition, and it also talks about collaboration and communication, and I'd like to see it include something about student outcomes or something, and so I could just propose something tonight, or we could discuss it at the next meeting. That was an example. Let me see what the other,
Would you be willing to just make it as a request for the next, not the next meeting, but the next document next year from 20 to 21? Or
so it's a
whatever?
3-year document, and it is a working document.
Yeah, so,
So what do you think of that option, or other, Mrs. Russo?
Well, I have a question. It has, so I know the schools use this as their planning document, and.
The major
it does-
categories,
Yeah, yep, okay.
Yeah.
So this, in a way, has already gone into effect with the schools, or?
Well, again, I think
We-
they've been working on this, so they've seen it, but, again, Ms. Simon and I can certainly meet, I can go over her questions. Honestly, I've seen them already. I think they're actually positive suggestions. I can incorporate them in, and you can see this at your next meeting. So I'm not, we're working in this direction. I don't think it substantially changes the direction of the plan or what we're working on. I just think it adds clarity, and instead of sort of doing that work tonight at the meeting, if we could do that offline and then send it to you, I just think that'd be perfectly fine with me.
Mr. Nelson?
I think that that's a good suggestion. I think that rather than debate it tonight, give the administration a chance to respond to your comments, put together a revision, and then we can look at it at our next meeting.
Okay. Ms. Monica? Yeah.
I would just ask that we not do anything major that's time-consuming, that, you know, if you want to tweak it a little bit here and there, I can understand that. But I don't think Eric should take on the burden of rewriting the whole thing at this point in time.
It was,
Yeah.
it was 2 or 3 suggestions, and some were very specific, like, did we leave something out of this list of
All
categories?
right, so we'll see it
Yeah,
with a
that- it
few
wasn't to
changes at the next meeting.
The goal isn't to change the plan.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, all right. So we will come back to that at our next meeting. Thank you. And the next topic is to the rental fees collection policy. This is a second reading. Last time, we were able to look at this proposal that Ms. Kasha had put together for us. So, do
Madam
people
Chair, I
have-
make a motion that the school committee approve, oh, this is the first reading, I'm sorry, I thought we did this
No,
before.
No, this is second reading, I think.
Oh, it says a first reading.
Rental-
Oh, yeah, okay, I make a motion that we approve the rental fees collection policy submitted in our backup materials.
Okay,
Second with a question.
okay. Mrs. Monaco?
Nicole, have you and Bob and Eric all looked at this and accepted it as what you believe it should be?
I'll say yes to that. I have looked at it. I don't believe that it needs to be updated more than she already has.
Okay, I want to make sure you're all on the same page. That's-
I wrote it, so I agree with
You wrote it, you're off the hook.
Good.
Okay, Bob agrees with it. Eric, what about you?
Yeah, we need to have a policy. I agree with it. The lunch stuff, I think as long as,
No, this is the rental
This is the rental stuff, so
fees
I-
collection
that's-
for building rentals.
that's fine
That's
with
what we're
me.
talking
So
about
there's
right
no
now.
lunch stuff in this
No.
policy?
No, this
sorry,
is
I was
for
looking at the
building
wrong-
rentals.
looking at the wrong one, but
Okay.
I'm saying that's the first
So-
reading, but the rental one is fine.
Okay,
I'd like
all
to make a suggestion, and I could make it as an amendment to the motion. Do we want to change the name of it to Building Rental Fees Collection Policy, so it's clear, because we do collect fees in other aspects of the district?
Will that conflict?
Maybe. Is that an
Something
appropriate
else?
title for it?
It's about building rental fees, right? And that's all it applies to, right?
Yeah, rentals, yeah.
So I'd like to, I'd like to
Add the word.
suggest that we, I don't know if a chair is allowed to make an amendment, but,
I'll amend my motion, Madam Chair, to approve the rental fees collection policy with the proviso that we amend the title of it to Building Rental Fees Collection Policy, Fall 2019.
okay? Any further questions? Any further comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain, and the chair votes aye, so that's 400. I would like to make a request. Is this possible for us to file it? It would obviously be filed under our financial policies, and Sharon, you're a little more familiar with this, but the financial policies have certain codes, letters. Could you assign it a code? Great, thank you. All right. And the next topic is our elementary space, building space needs. And Dr. Conti or Mr. Larkin, do you have any updates for us?
Madam Chair, what we've done since the last meeting was speak to the MSBA about the elementary school configuration and application. And again, as we stated, we can have one priority. So I think in 8 weeks or so, God, that's scary to think, December, we should be hearing pretty shortly about the the high school, and at that point, again, well, it's going to be on every agenda, so we continue to think about it, but in the relatively near future, we're going to need to decide which priority that would be. If, again, we either receive the high school, and that way we can start that process and put forward an elementary school, or if we don't receive backing, then we're going to have to choose potentially a new direction.
Are there other comments about this ongoing conversation we're having about the elementary school building needs, space needs? Okay. Mr. Larkin, could you update us? Have other people, I didn't go back and check, but did we add change one question and add a question to the survey?
I don't believe the survey's been updated, no.
Okay.
I don't think we had clarification on exactly what we were supposed to update it to, so I actually took the survey down so we wouldn't be getting people filling it out without the complete
Okay.
survey being there.
All right, so I thought it was pretty clear we wanted to add the question that Dr. Conti had asked, and I don't have that paper in front of me. But I can get that for you. And were there other yeah, Mrs. Monaco?
I just felt as though the survey was sort of hollow at this point. I think we don't have enough in it. And I think that's maybe what, I
Okay.
didn't talk to Patrick, but I think maybe that's what he was thinking, is it wasn't a substantial enough survey.
Okay, so
But that's just my opinion.
mhm. How do other people feel about waiting on the survey then? Agree?
Yeah, I'd like to
Okay.
see it. I don't know if I've seen it. Can we get it
Okay.
in our backup, Sharon, the survey? And
All
maybe at
right.
our next meeting?
What
Maybe
was
suggest-
on it?
And
and then-
maybe suggest things to add to it so
Yeah.
that it has some meat to it.
Okay. That's good. The other thing that we discussed at our last meeting was having one of our meetings open, inviting, it's not a public hearing because that's a legal title, but a public opportunity for people to invite people who, people are invited at any time. We do have this agenda item on our meeting agenda every time now, so anyone could come and speak with us about it at our meetings. But to have a time when we might invite the public specifically to come and talk about what they might envision in terms of the options that we've been banding around. We've not made any decisions. We've somewhat ruled out the idea of having a change in the configuration of the elementary schools and having a fifth grade academy. There's probably not going to be that happening with a pre-K separate building. We've talked about having one large building at the Fox Hill site, which several of us have expressed concern about and discomfort with. And we've talked about replacing both the Fox Hill and the Pine Glen where they are now. And we've also talked about replacing the Fox Hill and the Pine Glen both on the site of the Fox Hill with perhaps some shared spaces. And that's what we were referring to earlier when Dr. Conti and Mr. Kuna spoke with the MSBA about that option. So we do still have a number of options. We haven't narrowed it down, but, and I think maybe in our next meeting, we might be, if people can think about it, and if we feel strongly like that none of us want one of those options, maybe we can rule those out. But I also would like to schedule the time when we're going to have a public hearing, a public forum, sorry, I don't want to use a legal term. Maybe we were just saying it's only 8 weeks until we hear about last year's proposal, and then we need to have some decisions for our staff to be able to put together a proposal for April about elementary school space. So would people be interested in starting to publicize that we're going to invite people to come and talk about the options that we still have on the table at one of the November meetings, or what would people like to do with that? Mr.
I
Nelson?
think, Madam Chair, it's a good idea maybe to advertise or invite people to come to our November meeting and to give us their thoughts
Okay.
about whether or not we should, pursue a two elementary school option or a one elementary school option or something else. Then by December, we'll have the public input, and then maybe as a committee, we can come to some more definitive conclusions.
Oh, that's right, we don't have 2 meetings in November, so we could do that in November.
There's
That
one
would
in
be
November and one in December.
November 17th, I believe, is the date,
Again,
but yeah.
usually excuse me, Madam
Yeah,
Chair, through
yeah.
the chair, the day before we leave on winter break is typically when MSBA gives you the bad news or the good news about moving forward in the process. So again, Mr. Nelson certainly I would attend any forum, I would listen to the input, but we wouldn't know at that point whether, and it may not be relevant whether we have the high school project moving forward or whether we don't, because we still have the elementary issues no matter what. So all I'm saying is I just think that, again, the timing here is we have the high school renovation in. We'll find out right towards the end of December. And at that point, we either need to resubmit the high school for the 9th time or change our priority. And even if, I just, in speaking to the MSBA, we would still need to pick one elementary school. We'd have to
Right.
make a strong case. I do
Right.
think Fox Hill would be the stronger case because we have modular classrooms in existence. And even if we were to pick the one school, we could discuss sort of some of what you're talking about even after the statement of interest is submitted. So we don't have to make all of those decisions prior to April. We just basically have to say we're considering some of those conversations. If our project gets prioritized, then through the design phase, which takes a whole nother year and a half with the MSBA in partnership, a lot of those conversations would come out in terms of size of the school, location of the school, combining the two elementary schools, that sort of thing would come out in partnership with the MSBA. Because they're not going to support financially anything that they don't approve of ahead of time.
So if we could just back up a minute, did you have a question? Yeah.
Not a question, sort of an opinion. I don't think it makes sense to have a public hearing on what we're going to do before we find out if the high school is approved or not. If we find out right before the winter break, then in January, we could dedicate a certain amount of time in 1 or 2 meetings for anyone who wants to give us input as we plan going forward with an elementary project. I think that timing makes more sense, and I also still think that one of the things we need to know, and I don't know how to find this out or when to find it out, is whether or not we can build on the Pine Glen site.
Okay, and before you answer that, I actually have been operating, I think, under a different understanding. I thought that last spring, that this committee had decided that we were not going to submit another proposal for the high school renovation, that this 8th one was the last one. So
Correct.
I don't see any need to wait to hear whether we got a money or funding from MSBA or not. To me, that's a very separate issue. And if we don't get funded, we have to address what does that mean and how can we move forward with the high school renovation, because I think we've all agreed that we do need to have a high school renovation. And to me, that's a totally separate issue, and it's all night, it's been talked about as the same issue and the same timeline. So that's why, and I had earlier heard, I believe, Dr. Conti, that you said if the school committee decided by the end of this year, which is the end of December in my mind, we would have time, the staff would have time to put in a statement of interest about elementary schools for next April. So that's why I've been pushing it, that we make our decision by December. And so when Mr. Nelson proposed that we have this public invitation to come and give us input on our process, that it be in November. I suppose if we waited till January, we might still have time because we don't have to propose the whole design.
Exactly.
I understand we don't have to, but I thought you had told me that the end of December would be a good timing. So the reason I've been pushing it is because I've been going under that understanding of a timeline of us making our decision by the end of December. So we could wait until January, but, so now, assuming that we could wait till January, I would still prefer to have a public meeting for input in November, because then there's still a meeting in December, or even if we want a couple of meetings in January to have our conversation about, okay, we've had our conversations, we've expressed already some of our preferences, but we haven't made a decision. We get public input, it might affect how we go forward in our final decisions, which we might make in December, which we might make in January. So that's why I would like to have this announced, that we have a public meeting in November, as Mr. Nelson suggested it. So that's sort of why I've been pushing so hard for this timeline. So what's your
All right, so
okay,
if,
response?
I mean, if you want to put out some kind of notice that if anyone has any input they'd like to give us, they could
Yeah.
come to the first, whatever, 45 minutes of the November meeting, and see if anyone shows up. But I guess the way I look at these things is that, for instance, when we had all those meetings to discuss changing the
Yes.
times, we had a very specific plan in place. And what we were doing is we were presenting a plan
Yeah.
and asking for input. We don't have a plan at this point in time. We're pretty much confident that what we will do is go forward with a request to SBA for probably what, Tarek, a replacement at Fox Hill, and then work with them over time to make, right? So I guess if I were a parent in the community and I heard, well, you're gonna have this meeting, what is it you're asking me? You know, we're not there yet. That's just my opinion, is we're not there yet. But I don't object if you wanna you know, if you wanna specify the first 45 minutes of the November meeting, anyone who wants to come and give us input, great. I don't think we're there yet, that's all.
And I agree that it's not likely we get a lot of input until we have something more concrete. So I
Yeah.
do agree with that. Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, it's kind of a catch-22. Do we make a decision and then ask for input? Or do we ask for input and then make a decision? I think it's nice to get the input first and then make a decision. At least you're respecting the input that's coming in from the community rather than saying, this is what we want to do, what do you think?
But do you wanna
But
give choices? You know, I mean, what are you
Well, I
asking?
think we
just wanna
have
deal with
choices already.
Just generic,
Yeah.
I think you should
Well, I
build
mean, I
something on
think
the
that-
landlocked parcel.
No. I think that if people have been
Not
watching
going at
these
that.
meetings, I don't know how many people are
I
watching
didn't jump,
them,
did I?
but I think we're
Nah.
looking at probably two different proposals. And I don't know if we're gonna get, we're not gonna get approval for two schools, two elementary schools
2
and the high
years in a
school.
row.
Of course not. So the question is, do we build a 500 plus or minus school at the Fox Hill to replace the Fox Hill? Or do we build a bigger one to replace both the Fox Hill and the Pine Glen? And I think it would be nice to get public input. I don't think we're gonna be able to afford to build two separate elementary schools, and I think we need to replace both of them. I don't think we're gonna get the funding from the town to do that, that's just my opinion. But I'd like to hear from the public as to whether they have strong feelings one way or the other about a larger school at Fox Hill, a medium-sized school at Fox Hill, and just keep the Pine Glen for another 10 years, and then we'll go back to MSBA in 10 years and ask them for approval for another elementary school. I mean, those are the kind of things, I'd like to hear some back and forth from the public on that.
What if
Okay.
we made it specific, though, that what we're going to discuss is X, Y, and Z? Like,
Okay,
we're
yep.
going to discuss whether it should be one huge building to combine two schools,
That's what I would like to see.
or whether it should be two buildings on one site, or whether it should be a building where Fox Hill is and a building where Pine Glen is, so that we have parameters around what we're asking opinions for, instead of just, well, you know,
I
we.
agree.
I think that's what this original survey asked. And so that could be, I mean, maybe we could finalize that survey and put it out or not put it out as a survey, but put it out as this is what we want to get input on at our public invitation. And I know there's a couple people still waiting to speak. So Mrs. Russo, did you want to?
So I guess time-wise, is there a reason for town meeting warrant article that we would need to submit a warrant article for design or anything of that nature in January?
Good question.
No. There is not a warrant article question, it's whether or not if we got approved for the high school and then tried in April to submit one for the elementary school, if the a town manager would sign off on that if it's not in the debt schedule and the money's not available to us. So he has the final signature on that MSBA form before we can submit it to the state.
Okay.
And Board of Selectmen would also have to vote on that as well, too. So I think that was really the concern with not knowing the answer for December on the high school statement as to which direction to move for April. But I still believe the conversation could continue.
Okay. And then, so if we're not under the gun for January town meeting warrant article regarding this, I keep going both ways. I think you'll have more people come in January because we're talking about budget. People come for the budget and then they look for other things or vice versa, so you're going to get that input. So personally, I think if you want to maximize the amount of people that you know, could have here at night, which would be excellent, I think January with budget discussions might bring in extra people too. I have other than that, no preference between November or January.
Mr. Eiler, did you want to contribute to this conversation here?
Thank you. First off, if anyone was listening to Ms. Monaco, I'd like to highlight that town meeting rezoned the landlocked forest just to stop that kind of behavior.
John, can't you take a joke?
It doesn't mean it won't get asked.
So there's no need to panic. The other thing I wanted to raise was, I think, and there's probably good justification for this, but obviously the school committee and administration is all at the point of looking at how to, what do we do to, for buildings and to solve, perceived problems in the elementary schools in terms of space and so on. That may not be as obvious to everyone else. So in looking at how some big ticket items were handled in the past, with, for instance, with DPW, with the new structures that are being put in for that, the town administrator had actually made a BCAT video touring the various facilities and showing how they were beyond repair and space limitations and so on. With the MDRA connection, which is another big ticket item, DPW had a very large presentation on that they gave to Selectmen Town Meeting, Ways and Means, showing the issues with water shortages and problems with our current capacity and the various reservoirs and so on. What I would suggest is, as a marketing activity, that I think the school committee and administration needs to sell the need for the new buildings. What is the exact issue or issues that are being addressed? We've heard portables. Dr. Kine has mentioned how the elementary schools, even if we wanted to have more teachers, to be no rooms for them. I think the town needs to see, and its various representatives need to see, what are the specific issues that are trying to be addressed, how we imagine new buildings will address that, and why there's perception that there isn't some sort of incremental solution. Well, if we just tack another portable on, we'll be all set, or whatever. So what's something that gives a compelling story as to what's driving us to, we must have new buildings to resolve the issues we see with demographics and what have you. I think that would be pretty fundamental, because I can already hear the arguments of, well, we already have all our kids in the schools now and those buildings don't look so bad, and there's a lot of reasons people come up with why we don't need this, and I think to preempt that, I think you need to have an answer to those questions ahead of time. So I would suggest, if possible, a first step in a public forum wouldn't be give us your ideas of how you would like to make a new building. The first step should be justifying the fact that you actually need one, so that everyone's bought in and invested in creating a solution, and then they'll be over that hurdle, and then they'll be ready to have that conversation of how do we address this. I I feel like you're jumping the gun a little bit and making the assumption everyone's on board with wanting to do this.
Okay. Mrs. Monaco?
One of the things that I feel is almost a little, if there's such a thing as a little elephant, sort of an elephant in the room, is having some experience working with the town on funding these large projects. I think it's unrealistic to think that if we are turned down by SBA for the high school, and yet we request to go ahead with a good portion of the project in segments, I think it's unrealistic of us to expect that on the heels of that request, we can also get a new elementary school. I don't see it happening. So I guess to the degree that you're kind of pushing forward, I'm kind of pulling back because I don't see it happening. And I think we need to be considerate of the fact that if we have to fix the high school without SBA, it's twice as much money as what the town was counting on spending. And I just don't see it all happening. So, I don't know, that's what I think.
Did you have some, Mr. Nelson?
Yeah, John, your comments are very well spoken. I do remember we had a 10-year capital plan done a while back, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and we're following some of the recommendations in that capital plan, but we shouldn't take for granted as a committee that we have to sell the need. The need was set forth in the plan, but nobody's got the plan in front of them, so that's not a bad idea.
Trying to pull that up.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. We should get the capital plan out, and we should take another look at it and start the process of trying to explain why we need it. I mean, the buildings are beyond their useful life. It's been because we've kept them so well-maintained over the years that we're still using them. I mean, there are cities and towns all over Massachusetts that are knocking down buildings that are younger than our buildings. Some of it is, I think, functional obsolescence, but we do have to make that decision. And maybe we can have Mr. Kuna do a video going through the two schools and showing why they're obsolete and why we need new ones. And yeah, not a bad idea. Thank you, John, for your comments.
Did you want to add something there? Yeah, I mean, I think that what you're talking about is a really good idea. I think that those of us who sit here, both the committee and people who come a lot, are very aware of the need at all three buildings, at the high school and at the Fox Hill and at the Pine Glen. And that it's, the reason, again, I would like us to go forward with this conversation because it's clear that it's our job to make that decision and to decide what we feel is educationally best for the students. And that's not to say that we don't need to be respectful of the fact that where is the money going to come from is an issue beyond the scope of this board. And we have to work with people all across town, and it is a concern. But I know that some people would be in support and others not, but we need to let them know all the reasons why we feel it's, and why we know it's so important that it go forward. So I would like to add to the process that we've been talking about, a way to put together something. We do have our master plan, which I don't think it's more than 5 years old. I think it's less than that. We looked at it the other day, Mr. Kuna. It was 2017, so it's 2 or 3 years old, but it does show how much work all of these buildings need. And so I agree that I think this is a great part of us moving forward. But I also feel like it's our job to continue to have the conversation about what makes the most sense for the education of the students here, and in the most financially responsible way, which is why I would even consider a 900 or 1,000 student school if it was going to save us money. It's one of the reasons I was considering a 5th grade academy. But when we realized it was an extra $1 million to put another tier of buses on, it didn't seem like an educationally advantageous, so if it's not financially. So I would still be in favor of having public input in November. We could set aside a half an hour, 40 minutes. It doesn't have to be the only time we get public input. And that would not just be a come and tell us what you want, but it be, these are the options that we are looking at. So it would be specific to, I thought we had 3 options, but maybe there's 4, I thought we had decided to move forward with. So the public invitation in my mind would be for specifically these topics. And then I liked what you said, Mr. Nelson, that we would, as we continue, I have my preferences, you have your preferences, but if I heard, if a couple of people came and gave their opinions, it would influence how I saw the whole process. And that doesn't mean that if we were to narrow it down again and feel that we needed to go in a certain direction, that we have another opportunity for public input. I mean, this is not to say that at any point, any person in Burlington is welcome, any parent, any family, any resident is welcome to contact us or to come to our meetings and give us your input on any of these topics that we've been discussing. So this idea of having a public invitation is only in addition to other input that I'd like to see. I would still like to move forward with our conversation, because maybe we all agree on one, and then, but if we heard public input, we might not. And then if we did agree on one and got more public input, it might change or influence our final decision. So probably we should wrap this up. And it sounds like the options are to lay out the 3 or 4 options that we're still considering, and to ask for public input and specifically invite the public either to our November meeting, which is on, I said it wrong before, it's November 19th, and we could still have another public invitation later, or if the committee feels we should just wait until January to have that conversation, to have that public invitation. So,
I like the 19th, that's my idea.
the November 19th, I would be in favor of, and Mrs. Monaco, Mrs.
I'm fine with that.
November 19th, Mrs. Monaco, is that, you comfortable with that? Okay. So if we could include it on our agenda,
It'll be a certain amount of time.
Yeah,
Like
we'll
for a
set-
public hearing.
set,
Right.
yeah, maybe 30 minutes, and, if we had 20 people and everyone had 3 minutes and we went over 30 minutes, I would be okay with that. But why do, maybe we could set 30 minutes in the agenda, Mrs. Gilbert, and, if people come, that's great, and if not, we will continue our conversation. And so, and then the next piece to finish this conversation is, we need somebody to take the lead on that wonderful video that we're talking about, that would include the statistics from our master plan, that would include pictures of parts of our buildings that are in dire need, the crowded classrooms, and things like that. So, Dr. Cundy, do you have a suggestion of someone who might take the lead on that project? Okay, and I'd be happy to help if that was helpful, but you will look into that, okay. Any other questions or comments on the elementary building discussion?
And again, I think some of the building's more significant needs really can't be videotaped. So I
Okay,
think we can maybe explain the failing systems, and we can discuss that.
Okay.
But
And I also want to acknowledge that we may come up with what we feel is the best plan, and the town may not be ready to support that financially at that point. And that's, I understand that, and that's part of the process that we need to go through. But we also need to go through, we have established a need, we have identified a need, and I would like us to say what we feel is the solution to that need, and then continue to work with the town, which, they've been great. The town's been fabulous with supporting the schools. And I would hope that with an explanation of why we feel we need these new buildings, that would be continued. So, okay? Any other comments? All right, is that enough? There were 2 things that we were going to follow up on with that. Okay. All right. So now the new business. We have the policies. And this is a first reading, I believe. Does that sound right? So we have a revision of our emergency plan. file EBC, where we added a few words to update it, and it was with input from the police department. So those were updated. Do people have any questions on that policy?
I have one question.
Okay, Mr. Nelson?
A question for Dr. Conti. Eric, we added some language in the second paragraph about the superintendent developing and maintaining plans that meet the minimum requirements of state law. Has that already been done, or is that something that you have to work on? It seems to me you've probably done it already.
Yeah, we have emergency plans in the
Yeah.
schools.
Mhm.
Okay.
And that was in the old policy as well. This is a
Yeah.
revision of we have this policy already. It already has the superintendent doing that, and he did explain that we've been doing that, right?
Is this a first reading, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Okay. I have no other comments.
All right. The next policy is a new policy that Mrs. Monaco and I are proposing to comment on student conduct on school buses. And it's based on a template, but we've adapted it to, we've gotten some updates from legal counsel, and it's regarding students having the privilege of riding on the buses, the responsibility of the school committee and the staff and the students and the parents for student safety on the buses. And it doesn't specify all of the behavioral expectations, but it says that in each of the student handbooks for the, elementary, middle, and high school, there are set expectation details around the expectations. So that's also a first reading. So do you have any questions?
Just one question on, why do we have so many letters here at the beginning? EEAEC, also JICC.
Right. So the EEAC is what is in the MASC template. The JICC in the bottom below the text, it says note. JICC means it is cross-referenced in the policy manual in section J, which that section, which we haven't looked at yet, has student
But when we vote
policies.
this, we're gonna vote it as JICC?
Well, okay,
No?
so we wouldn't. All right. I mean, we could do it, and we
Do
could
need
just,
all these
we could
Seems
insert it.
confusing to me.
Well, this being a first reading, people should consider whether they want to vote it next time solely under section E, or if we want to use the same wording and not have to go over it again, and just insert it into section J in our book at the same time. So we would be killing two birds with one stone. So we can make that decision next time. But
Okay.
that's a good question, and
Yeah.
that's what we would have to decide.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Any questions on that policy? And then the third policy we have a first reading on is the meal charge policy, and that's EFD. And there's just one change. It's updating it to reflect the fact that the school cafeterias are generally self-supporting, but there are times when the school committee has supplemented the funds in order to meet some of our requests and our values around nutrition and student accessibility to the meals. So we added a word to say
Okay.
primarily a
One
self-supporting.
question,
Yep.
Madam Chair. Nicole, have you reviewed this policy? The meal charge policy, are you okay with this?
I didn't thoroughly, I guess.
Okay, maybe,
Look it over.
Between now and our next
Yes,
meeting, if
I
you
can
have
do
any
that.
suggestions, I would love to hear them.
Sure.
Thank you.
all right. Yes, Mrs. Russo?
So, just so we don't end up in the news like other communities with this, we don't have any set policy if there's no funds for a certain amount of time, or it's gone into a negative balance, we're not feeding them hot lunches, or how does this relate? And will you become, because it says superintendent, will you become the ultimate gatekeeper? Throw that on your desk?
I guess reluctantly. So I think we did try to have some controls in place. I don't think this committee was ever very comfortable with that. I'm not sure I was very comfortable with it. So I think we make sure every child gets fed, and we try to work with the families to track down any sort of issues. If there's long delinquent issues, that we have very few of those. I think we can have other conversations, but again, I think you could maybe make the argument in high school, but it's not the student's fault that the account as delinquent. So I just think that's, I don't want a policy to limit our options for children.
And then just because we do fund this account, when the majority of the funding, when we do have to supplement this, is due to food costs. It's not due to delinquent payments. I just
Yes.
want that clear.
Yes. Yep. Okay. So, so we'll have our second reading, and if you would, be sure to give us your, input on that, okay? All right, so that was, our first readings for those. So the next item, I believe that would be you, Dr. Conti, the out-of-state staff travel.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Assistant Superintendent Larkin has submitted a request for Carrie Fortunato and Renee Sacco to attend the RTI Multi-Tiered Best Practices Institute in Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina. We've been going to this conference annually. It's by Tom Jenkins. We work with Tom in North Carolina. We've done a lot of exchanges with him, and the curriculum budget will pay for the anticipated costs. And I recommend the school committee approve out-of-state travel for Renee and Carrie to attend the RTI conference in Wrightsville Beach on October 28th and 29th.
So moved.
Second, and I
Okay.
just want to say, after reviewing the RTI presentation, I'm very pleased with their work and very happy to see their names in attending this.
Okay. Any questions on the out-of-state travel? We have a motion on the floor. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Chair votes aye. All right, and then the middle school music stipends.
Yeah, I think after the start of the meeting, I'm a little gun-shy on these, but I'll do my best. The changes in the middle school schedule and some of the programmatic development are causing some needs to update some of the middle school stipends. So when I spoke to Mr. Middleton on what that is, and I'll try to be succinct. So chamber strings is a select strings group, select chorus is obviously a select singing group, and stage band is a select band group. The orchestra, chorus, and band that are non-select were moved out of sort of activity block into the regular schedule. Because they moved into the regular schedule along with the teaching class, there's no time in the day to have a select strings, chorus, or band. So these three groups used to be during the school day, and there's no longer time in the school day because of where band currently falls. Because the middle school day ends roughly at 2, and the high school day ends at 3, we have a late bus now 3 days a week. What we'd like to do, I believe it's once a week, is to continue to have a select strings, the chamber strings, the select chorus, and the stage band, but have them be after-school programs. And that's pretty typical for most middle schools. But again, it's the change in schedule that has caused this. Again, there's a criticism, why didn't I think of this ahead of the scheduling change in the operating budget? Mea culpa, I missed these three performing groups, I apologize. I know what the contract says is typically we should build a stipend up $500 first year, $750 second, and then place it. And I guess I'm asking, and the union typically doesn't have a problem accelerating that process if these three groups were already in existence just during the school day. So we sort of, they're not new programs, they're not starting, we're just running them after school. So because of that, I'd like the school committee to support creating the stage band, select chorus, and the chamber strings stipends for the middle school. So those are the justification for those three. The middle school string director is, right now we have a middle school band director stipend, which is equivalent, and a middle school choral director, which is equivalent. And the stipend is for the rehearsal time and performances that occur in the evenings and after school. Our strings program is growing. We have now a full strings program at the middle school, and so we require, in terms of equity, believe it or not, a middle school string director so that we can have both a chorus, choral, band, and string director at the middle school. So those would be the 4 stipends. The union was made aware that these were going to be on the agenda tonight. Again, they typically don't have an issue with us adding stipends or opportunity for unit members, and I don't believe there'll be an issue with these. The $7,300 is obviously not something that's in the budget that we would incorporate, especially as this is a bargaining year as well. And Mr. Nelson, you asked about where that would come from. It would probably come out of school choice for the remainder of this year, just to maintain those programs. And again, then we would incorporate it into the contract and into the operating budget for fiscal '21. So that's the explanation, and it's recommended the school committee approve the 4 middle school music stipends for a total amount of $7,387 as requested.
Okay.
So
Mr.
moved.
Nelson, okay.
Second.
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Okay, Mr. Nelson?
Eric, are these going to be 4 different individuals that are going to be receiving the stipends?
Maybe. I think the chamber strings person may be the strings director. I'm not, those are 2 separate programs. So besides the overlap there, I'm assuming the choral teacher is going to get the select chorus stipend, and the band teacher is going to get the stage band stipend. Again, the chamber strings, select chorus, and stage band all currently exist. Last year they existed during the school day. We just need to move them outside of the school day because of the change in the schedule.
I have no further questions, Madam Chair.
All right. Any further? Yes, Mrs. Russo?
I just hope that it doesn't diminish. Like, it was such a robust program, but we have the late bus, so I hope to see this still flourish.
Well, we're hopefully going to see actually more students participating in the
Yeah.
band, chorus, and orchestra because it's during the day and it's not during activity block and they're not competing. So hopefully those numbers will stay, and then the students who this is a passion of theirs would have that extra opportunity after school. So I can't answer your question, I'm hoping not, but it's something we'll
Yeah.
certainly look at to see how the schedule impacts participation.
Yes, and I think, these are the kinds of tweaks that when you put in a new schedule, you have to look at. And I'm sort of, in my mind, it's comparable to when we've had new directors, like when our new athletic director came on, there was some additional funding that we put into the budget so that he could initiate some of the things that he wanted to put in place, get some new things going, and I think this is part of putting in this new schedule, which obviously is being reviewed now. We're gonna have an opportunity to hear more about the new schedule at the middle school at our next meeting. But I think it's good to support these. This is a solution to something that would otherwise get lost, in the new schedule, and I definitely support it, so. Okay. Any other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The chair votes aye. That's 400. Thank you.
And just, I want to draw your attention to also something in this part of your packet. There's a MS musical. I think what you saw was an initial proposal that we're looking at. We're not incorporating that into any decision the school committee makes tonight. I believe Ms. Purchase, when she discusses her schedule with you at next meeting, is going to talk about the desire, she might have already talked to you about the desire of having a middle school musical in the spring. Again, it's going to be a school show. I think she's going to work on how she sort of funds that for year 1, and hopefully we'll have some ideas for you at the next meeting. But I do think the idea of a middle school musical is a good idea. But I just didn't want you to say it's not
Yes.
specifically discussed there.
All right. That's all of the items on the agenda. Is anyone here for public participation who would like to speak? No? Okay. Hold on. Sorry about that. The body has a need for an executive session now to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining, if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body, and the chair so declares, which I do. The BEA, the Burlington School Administrators, instructional assistants, the school office personnel, the school cafeteria workers, Unit D of BEA, and custodial staff. So we have a need to discuss these matters in executive session because to discuss them publicly would jeopardize the position of the body.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
Okay, Mrs. Russo?
Aye.
Mr. Nelson?
Aye.
Mrs. Monaco?
Aye.
The chair votes aye, and we are going to be in executive session. We will only reconvene in order to adjourn the public meeting.